5-4 binomials containing radicals. When we do this, we are foiling. We're doing the same exact thing you would do without the radicals. So if we look at our first example, we have 4 plus the square root of 7 times 3 plus 2 square root 7. We are foiling with these. So first, inner, outer, last, we're going to do the 4 times 3, which is 12. Then we have 4 times 2 square root 7, which is going to be 8 square root 7. Then we're going to do the square root 7 times 3, so that's 3 square root 7. And lastly, the square root of 7 times 2 square root 7, which is going to be 2 square root 49. Now, simplify these. If you have like terms, which you do, combine those like terms. So this is going to give us 12 plus 8 plus 3 is 11. Keep the square root of 7 plus 2 times the square root of 49 is 7. So that's 2 times 7. 2 times 7 is 14, so this becomes 12 plus 11 square root 7 plus 14. You now have the 12 and the 14, which are like terms, so combine them to give yourselves 26 plus 11 square root 7. If we look at B, we have 2 radical 3 minus square root 6 all squared. So this is the same exact thing as separating this with 2 square root 3 minus square root 6 times 2 square root 3 minus square root 6. So again, we're going to FOIL. So 2 square root 3 times 2 square root 3 is going to be 4 square root 9. 2 square root 3 times negative square root 6 is going to be a negative 2 square root 18. Then we have negative 6 times 2 square root 3, which is negative 2 square root 18. And then we have the negative square root 6 times the negative square root 6, which is a positive square root 36. So now simplify these as you can. That square root of 18, think about it. Your prime factorization of 18, you have 6 and 3. The 6 is 2 and 3. Pair of 2, so that's 3 square root 2. So that 3 times the negative 2 is going to give us a negative 6 square root 2. There we go. So then the next one turns into the same thing, negative 6 square root 2, and then that 36 is 6. So we did the square root of 9, which is 3, so 4 times 3 is 12. Minus 6 square root 2 minus 6 square root 2, that's going to be negative 12 square root 2, and then plus 6. The 12 and the 6 are like terms. Combine them. You're going to be left with 18 minus 12 square root 2. For C, we have 4 square root 5 plus 3 square root 2 times 4 square root 5 minus 3 square root 2. So we are going to FOIL these. So again, the 4 square root 5 times 4 square root 5 is going to be 16 square root 25. The 4 square root 5 times negative 3 square root 2 is going to be negative 12 square root 10. 3 square root 2 times 4 square root 5 is a positive 12 square root 10. And then 3 square root 2 times negative 3 square root 2 is going to be negative 9 square root 4. So now simplify this. The square root of 25 is 5, so that's 16 times 5. The negative 12 square root 10 plus negative 12 square root 10, plus 12 square root 10 is going to cancel out. And then that negative 4 times the square root of 2 is, negative 9 times the square root of 4 is going to be negative 9 times 2. The 16 times 5 is 80. The 9 times 2, or the negative 9 times 2, is negative 18. 80 minus 18 is going to leave us with 62. For D, we have the square root of 3 square root 2 plus square root 5 squared. So we are going to rewrite this as 3 square root 2 plus square root 5 times 3 square root 2 plus square root 5. So now we're going to FOIL. 3 times the square root 2 times 3 square root 2 is going to be 9 square root 4. 3 square root 2 times square root 5 is going to be 3 square root 10. Square root 5 times 3 square root 2 is 3 square root 10. And square root 5 times square root 5 is going to be the square root of 25. So the square root of that 4 is a 2, so that's 9 times 2. 3 square root 10 plus 3 square root 10 is going to be 6 square root 10. and then the square root of 25 is 5. 9 times 2 is 18. So 18 plus 6, square root 10, plus 5. 18 plus 5 is going to give us 23. So it's going to be 23 plus 6, square root 10. If we look at our next part of our notes, we have fractions that involve radicals in our denominator. So we have to get rid of those radicals in the denominator. In order to do that, we are going to be multiplying here. When we multiply, we're going to be multiplying by conjugates. Conjugates are literally the same terms but opposite signs. So that way when they multiply each other, they will cancel out something. In this case, we're wanting to cancel out that radical, so we are going to multiply top and bottom by the conjugate of our denominator. So the conjugate of that denominator, if we look at our first example, we have 3 plus the square root of 5 over 3 minus the square root of 5. So the conjugate of your denominator is literally going to be 3 plus the square root of 5. So if we do something to the bottom, we must do it to the top as well. So we are going to FOIL for both of these. So once again, 3 times 3, looking at your top, is 9. 3 times square root of 5 is 3 square root of 5. The square root of 5 times 3 is 3 square root of 5. And square root of 5 times the square root of 5 is going to be the square root of 25. This is going to all be over the 3 times 3, which is 9. 3 times square root of 5 is positive 3 square root of 5. The negative 5, or negative square root of 5 times 3 is negative 3 square root of 5. See how those are going to cancel out? And then the negative square root of 5 times the positive square root of 5 is going to be a negative square root of 25. So from here, simplify. Looking at our top, the 3 square root of 5 plus 3 square root of 5 is going to be 6 square root of 5. And then that square root of 25 is 5. Looking at the bottom, the 9 is going to stay. The 3 square root of 5 minus 3 square root of 5 cancels out. And then that negative square root of 25 is negative 5. Simplify even further. On the top, 9 plus 5 is 14. Keep the 6 square root 5 after that. So we're going to have 14 plus 6 square root 5. From the bottom, 9 minus 5 is 4. Now, look at what you can simplify. You can't simplify underneath the radical. So look at your terms outside of the radical. You have a 14, a 6, and a 4. Think about this. This is the same thing as saying 14 over 4 plus 6 square root 5 over 4. Can you simplify? Yes. The 4 and the 14 are both divisible by 2, so this is going to be 7 over 2. The 6 and the 4 are also divisible by 2, so the 4 becomes a 2, the 6 becomes a 3. So you could leave it 7 over 2 plus 3 square root of 5 over 2, or you can bring it back together, which I prefer to do, to give myself 7 plus 3 square root 5 all over 2. Remember with these, if they're not simplified completely, they are wrong. So you have to make sure that you simplify those if you can, especially like I said with the 14, the 6, and the 4, they're all divisible by 2, so divide them all by 2 to give yourself the 7 plus 3 square root of 5 over 2. For B, we have 1 over 2 plus the square root of 3. So the conjugate of the 2 plus square root of 3 is 2 minus the square root of 3. So we're going to multiply that by top and bottom. We're going to FOIL with the bottom, distribute with the top. 1 times 2 on the top is 2, and 1 times negative square root 3 is negative square root 3. This is all going to go over 2 times 2, which is 4. 2 times negative square root 3 is negative 2 square root 3. Square root 3 times 2 is positive 2 square root 3. And then the square root 3 times the negative square root 3 is negative square root 9. Simplify what you can. The top, can't do anything with, so leave it alone. So we're going to keep the 2 minus the square root of 3. The bottom, the negative square root 2, the negative 2 square root 3 plus 2 square root 3 cancels out. So we're just going to have 4 minus 3 because the square root of 9 is 3. 4 minus 3 is 1, and anything over 1 is itself. So our answer is just 2 minus the square root of 3. If we look at our next example, C, we have 1 over x plus the square root of y. The conjugate of the x plus the square root of y is x minus the square root of y. So top and bottom, x minus the square root of y, and we're going to multiply. The top, we're just distributing that 1, so it's just going to be staying as x minus the square root of y. On the bottom, however, we're multiplying, so x times x is x squared. X times negative square root y is negative x square root y. The square root of y times x is x square root y. And negative square root y times positive square root y is negative square root y squared. So if we simplify these, the top's going to stay x minus the square root of y. The bottom, those x square root y's cancel out. We're going to have x squared, and then that square root cancels out with the squared on the y, so minus y. You cannot simplify this any further, so this is your answer. For D, we have 1 over the square root of 5 minus the square root of 2. So we're going to multiply each top and bottom by the conjugate, which is the square root of 5 plus the square root of 2. Square root of 5 plus square root of 2. We're going to distribute that 1 in and be left with the square root of 5 minus the square root of 2. Then on the bottom, we're going to FOIL. The square root of 5 times the square root of 5 is the square root of 25. Square root of 5 times the square root of 2 is square root 10. Negative square root 2 times negative square root 5, negative square root 2 times square root 5 is going to be a negative square root 10. And negative square root 2 times square root of 2 is a negative square root of 4. Simplify where you can. Top stays. You can't simplify the square root of 5. You can't square root or take the square root of 2. So leave it. The square root of 25 is 5. The square roots of 10 cancel. The square root of 4 is 2. So the bottom is going to be 5 minus 2. 5 minus 2 is 3. So you're going to be left with the square root of 5 minus the square root of 2 all over 3. For example 3, we have if f of x is equal to the x plus 1 over x, find f of the square root of 3 plus 2. So wherever we see an x in this, we are going to replace it with the square root of 3 plus 2. So f of the square root of 3 plus 2 is going to equal square root 3 plus 2 plus 1 all over square root 3 plus 2. So we are going to multiply top and bottom here by the conjugate of that square root 3 plus 2, which is going to be the square root of 3 minus 2. So top and bottom, square root 3 minus 2. We can also combine like terms on the top before we do that, which is going to give us the square root of 3 plus 3. So now we got to FOIL. The square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is going to be the square root of 9. Square root of 3 times negative 2 is negative 2 square root 3. 3 times the square root of 3 is going to be 3 square root 3. 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. I'm going to put this all over. The square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is just the square root of 9. Square root of 3 times negative 2 square root 3. 2 times the square root of 3, positive 2 square root 3. 2 times negative 2, negative 4. So now we're going to simplify this. Your like terms on the top are the negative 2 square root 3 plus 3 square root 3. We can simplify the square root of 9. That becomes a 3. So we're going to have 3 plus square root 3 minus 6 on the top. And on the bottom, we're going to have 3, cancel out those radicals, minus 4. From here, the 3 minus 6 is negative 3 plus square root 3, and 3 minus 4 is negative 1. Change the sign on your top. This is going to be positive. This is going to be negative. That becomes positive. So we're just left with 3 minus the square root of 3. For our last example, we have f of x is equal to 2x over x, and we're finding f of 4 plus square root 2. So we're just plugging these values in. So we're going to have f of 4 plus square root 2 is going to equal 2 times 4 plus square root 2 all over 4 plus square root 2. So we're going to distribute first with the 2. This is going to give us 8 plus 2 square root 2 all over 4 plus square root 2. We're going to multiply top and bottom by the conjugate, which would be 4 minus square root 2. Put parentheses around the binomial on top, and FOIL. 8 times 4 is 32. Oops. There we go. 8 times negative 2 is, negative square root 2 is negative 8 square root 2. 2 times 4 is going to be a positive 8 square root 2. And then 2 square root 2 times negative square root 2 is negative 2 square root 4. This is all going to be over 4 times 4, which is 16. 4 times negative 2 is negative 4 square root 2. Square root 2 times 4 is positive 4 square root 2. Square root 2 times negative square root 2 is negative square root 4. So now we're going to simplify this. The 8 square root 2's cancel out on the top, and the square root of 4 is 2. So it's going to be 32 minus 2 times 2. The bottom, the 4 square root 2's cancel out, so we're going to have 16 minus the square root of 4, which is 2. The negative 2 times 2 is negative 4, so this is 32 minus 4, and then 16 minus 2 is 14. The 32 minus 4 is 28, and that's going to stay over the 14. They're both divisible by 4, so we're going to by 2, so we're going to simplify this, and it's going to be, it's also divisible by 7. So this is going to be a 2, and this is going to be a 1, so it's just 2.